Okay, hey, hello everyone. It's May 15th, 2016, but it's more commonly known as episode 4 of Game of Thrones, so that's really truly how the day will be remembered. By the way, you guys, Terry is into Game of Thrones. We've already talked about it before you got here.
I need to catch up. I feel like I am becoming irrelevant.
I just plain am irrelevant. I feel like
apparently it's real important because guest after guest after guest has been privy to Game of Thrones.
I feel like those are the guests that you choose.
Well, hey, you gotta, it's what it takes to make it in this world. So anyway, we're recording on May 15th. It's episode 44, and over there's Ben Charles.
Hi, everybody.
And Megan Arns.
Hello.
And Laurel has a gig right now. She's playing marimba for the opening of this cool David Lang piece just across the street in our art gallery. So I listened to her a few minutes ago and then darted over here. So joining us today is percussionist and professor of music at the Oregon Center for the Arts at Southern Oregon University. He has performed extensively with ensembles Redfish Bluefish, Skin and Bones, Conundrum, and Sonoluminescence, among many others. He can be heard on CD recordings performing the works of many composers, including Yanis Xenakis, William Kraft, and Mark Applebaum. So please welcome from Ashland, Oregon, Dr. Terry Longshore. How you doing?
Great. Hey, guys. Thanks.
With a cool gong behind him and Game of Thrones tonight.
Javanese gong.
Nice job, Megan. You could identify that just by looking at it, couldn't you?
Got it.
First guess.
He's been studying for those DMA exams.
Oh man, if that was
what kind of gong is this?
I'd be okay.
Wouldn't that be nice if that's what they asked you? They could just
man.
maybe not ask you about motets.
Percussion traditions around the world. I'm in.
Just gongs.
Yeah, just gongs.
Well, Terry, how is your week going? Tell us a little bit about what you're up to and maybe what projects you're working on and how life's treating you.
Cool. It's been super crazy. You guys were just asking if we were done, but we're on the quarter system here in Oregon, so we're in I think coming up on week 8 of our 10-week quarter, and then there's a finals week after that. So we just finished a whole week of events on what's called the Oregon Fringe Festival here, which is a completely student-produced festival in the arts, music, theater, creative writing, etc. And there were, within just the percussion group, there were at least 9 or 10 performances this last week.
That's great.
2 world premieres by my colleague Brian Jeffs. One, a really interesting graphic score that he modeled after maps of our region around here called Ashland, Oregon. That's the name of the piece. And then another one called Collective Resonance, which was a really cool piece for 8 beautiful big crystal singing bowls spread out outside around a big area, and then people walking by could signal the performers to either play or stop playing by putting up or taking down different chakra-colored flags. And so you just had these interesting harmonies that were coming in and out, and people strolling by and interacting with the performers. That was really cool.
Mm.
And it all culminated last night with a performance in the art facility here of a bunch of pieces that we played with some interactive digital lighting by David Bethel, who's one of my colleagues here. So they did drumming part 1 that had triggers on each bongo, and that was triggering through Max MSP, different light patterns that were kind of somewhat interacting with the phasing, etc.
Wow.
Awesome.
Several other pieces. So pretty cool culmination to that whole festival.
I saw a piece as I was kind of digging around for you, and I saw a Vic Firth video on YouTube of you and a video. There were kind of 3 screens, and I was going to mention it, and I forgot the title. I remember it starts with a P.
Penumbra.
It's a word I don't know. That's why.
Penumbra is like the idea of the shadow cast by an eclipse, basically. So that's a piece that David Bethel and I collaborated on. And it's for 3 video screens, 3 projectors, and I'm in shadow because I'm between the projectors and the screens. And so what is happening, you're seeing me perform, but also do certain movements and things that are only in shadow. And then the music I'm playing is triggering both video and electronic music events through Max MSP.
How do you guys get good at Max MSP? I know a lot of pieces use it, and it's not something I definitely can recognize it when I see it. Where should one start, do you think?
I got good at it by collaborating with people who are good at it, and I let them do all of it. About it. I couldn't do it.
I'm really good at pressing the spacebar.
Yeah, so David is one of those people who's just really adept and knows his way in and out of that really well, and so I'm happy to let him deal with that side of things. And
yeah,
sometimes I think pieces like that can be super effective and somewhat transparent as to how things are being controlled, and that's one of the things I really love about his work is when you see one of his pieces, whether it's an ensemble piece like ours or a solo piece like many of his, you're watching it and you're going, okay, is that live or is that recorded? Is that how is that happening? And it's all very, very magical that way, which I love.
Sounds like you have a lot of collaborative colleagues.
Yeah, I'm very lucky that way.
Really cool.
You mentioned graphics score, and I wanted to ask you at some point today about PASIC. I guess it was 2014 Focus Day. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So the subject was graphic notation, and you and John Lane were the hosts or creators. Is that right?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about just what it's like putting on a Focus Day, maybe what Focus Day is a little bit, and then I guess in particular that Focus Day?
Sure. Well, Focus Day is the opening day of PASIC, of the Percussive Art Society International Convention. And there's a theme every year that is drafted by the New Music and Research Committee. Typically one or a group of people put forward a theme, and that's batted around by the committee, and we have the next couple years laid out, and then a couple years after that we're talking about potential themes for. And so John approached me about collaborating on a theme for non-standard notations, innovative notations, whether that be graphic scores or text-based scores or other kinds of things. And so we put forward that proposal and ended up being selected for that 2014 PASIC. And it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of hard work. As you can imagine, you get hundreds of applications, and most of them, I'd say 99% of them, are all great applications that are really good ideas and interesting pieces, and a fair amount of duplication of pieces sometimes. And so that process of selecting performers and having certain works represented that you're really interested in presenting, but also kind of taking a risk on, okay, this is a new piece, it's going to be a premiere. We don't know what the piece is going to be yet. There's no existing documentation of that, but sometimes you're willing to do that because either the performer or the composer or both are very compelling. So
I had a quick question about something you just said. You said you get, obviously so many applications, and you said 99% of them are very good. And it must be frustrating in a sense to look at a great proposal and toss it aside and say, no, sorry, we're out of room. What might influence you to hang on to that one or to put it to the side?
Ben, you can't be mad because you didn't get picked. All right. We can't do that to you.
Yeah, I think a lot of it is, it was a little tricky when John and I did it together, because as a co-host, you're trying to balance, making sure your partner has a fair amount of say in what he or she is interested in presenting, as well as, making an argument for things you feel very strongly about. So I think what we found was that we kind of put things in three categories, things that we just felt individually first, that we felt this absolutely has to be on the day. I'm not going to budge on this one. That kind of thing. And then another category that was like, okay, I really like this, but maybe I don't feel quite as passionately about it. And then the third category was, okay, well, I could see this, not happening either just because the other ones we feel more strongly about, or something about it's a little more unknown, or something like that. And then we brought that to the table, and actually between the our top category between each other. We had enough things we agreed on, or that we felt, okay, yeah, I agree with you. We were able to make a first draft pretty easily. And then, of course, you have to deal with your time constraints. And then once you're all done, you have to present it to the executive committee, and they may or may not give you a stamp of approval. In our case, we had to go back and redraft some things. They wanted to see some changes to our initial idea, primarily around when we had things structured. But
how long is the process of putting all that together?
It's, I think you get this stuff to review about a month before they want to make announcements. So it's not a very long process.
Okay.
In our case, I think it was actually shorter than that. I know they've had some troubles with their computer systems the last couple of years, just getting things upgraded and getting things streamlined, and sometimes the process, I think last year especially, was shortened quite a bit.
Mm.
So it can be it's a quick turnaround.
Yeah.
I remember sitting in one of the kind of open meetings, the public meetings on the New Music Committee, and some of the discussion was, so we make these proposals, and of course with your proposal you probably have certain players in mind, and is it right that all you can do is influence them or encourage them to apply? You can't pick anybody for Focus Day, right?
Yeah, you can certainly encourage people to apply and we have done that a little bit when we have certain themes. We've said, hey, we'd love to see this piece represented or this composer represented, and certainly there are people that are known for their work with certain composers, so that can be at least a good advantage to approach someone, and say, hey, would you consider putting forth an application?
Yeah, sure. Well, Ben, I think you have a topic today. Is that right? You're going to talk about somebody for us?
Yes, of course. So my topic today was influenced by two things. One, I saw that Terry has a degree in business and teaches music business courses. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then also this person recently passed away, and I think that we didn't mention this, so I thought it was pretty pertinent. So today I wanted to talk about Remo Belli of Remo Drumheads, as we know them, who, like I said, just passed away on April 25th, 2016, so less than a month ago he passed away. Remo was born June 22nd, 1927 in Mishawaka, Indiana. And from a very young age, he was interested in music. His uncle played in a polka band at the local Italian club, which I never thought of polka as Italian, but there you have it. So his father actually wanted him to play accordion, but Remo became kind of fascinated with drums and began playing drums at the age of 12. Being born in 1927, this means that around the time he was in high school is when World War II was going on, so many of these sort of qualified drummers in town were drafted and were at war. So as a high school student, actually, he got quite a bit of gigging experience and became very competent because of it. So after graduating high school, he moved to LA and began touring with some pretty big-name acts of the day, including Anita O'Day and Betty Hutton. And when he wasn't touring, he was a session drummer. So during this time period, in the year 1950, he actually opened his own drum shop called Drum City. So because of who he was as a player, how well he was connected with other players, and owning a drum shop, being quite a large supplier for the LA area, different drum companies kind of took interest in Remo. And in particular, he was visiting the Slingerland factory in Chicago, where he met Bud Slingerland, and Mr. Slingerland showed Mr. Belli a new invention of a drum head made of mylar that was like stapled onto a hoop. And Remo was impressed by the tonal consistency and resistance to weather changes in this new head, but he was not so impressed by the mounting system, which was kind of shoddy. So Remo, when he returned to LA, I think it was his accountant, put him in touch with a chemist by the name of Sam Muchnick. And this chemist devised a system of punching holes around the edge of the head and then attaching it to an aluminum hoop with a fast-setting liquid resin, which, if you can tell, these are all of my words that I came up with. but anyway, they invented this mylar drum head, which is the basis for all synthetic drum heads we use today. And this original head was called the Weather King, which they still produce, but obviously they've diversified their lineup as well. So pretty shortly after they received the patent for this, they started manufacturing these Weather King drum heads in 1957. They had a 500 square foot facility that was adjacent to the Drum City shop, where they manufactured these drum heads. As you can probably imagine, back in the 1950s, the sort of traditionalists using calf heads were resistant to the idea of using all of a sudden plastic drum heads. So Remo had quite an uphill battle in front of him. Luckily, he got endorsements from Buddy Rich, Louis Bellson, and Gene Krupa, who were, quite frankly, probably the three premier drummers of the day.
Yeah, that helps a little bit.
That probably helped a little bit. So, like I said, he started manufacturing these drum heads in 1957, and the next few years they had really taken off. And by the time 1964 rolled around and the Beatles debuted on Ed Sullivan, the heads were everywhere, and Ringo actually played Remo drum heads on his Ludwig drum set on the Ed Sullivan debut. So at that point, rock and roll was kind of starting to take over, and skinheads couldn't keep up with the demand for people buying drum sets influenced by, Ringo Starr and the likes. So that also sort of helped Remo's business grow quite a bit. And then so in the 1980s, Remo developed what are called pre-tuned drum heads, which is a product that didn't really take off in its original form, but basically it was like a rim with a tensioned drum head on it, and the idea was that you were supposed to be able to clip these onto drums without having to, be an expert in tuning them. And in fact, pretty much the only reason they still make them is to play Mark Ford's Head Talk. You can actually buy from Steve Weiss the Remo PTS Head Talk set. But these heads developed into other interests, namely world music heads with, you've all seen like the djembes that have like the mounted heads on them. And then also Remo started taking an interest. His wife was a doctor that was interested in like alternative medicine, and this led him into an interest in music therapy. So he's actually collaborated with neuroscientists and discovered how music therapy can help different people, but in particular people with Alzheimer's, autism, and dementia. So through all these innovations and this wide market, Remo has grown into one of the largest percussion companies in the world, with a revenue of around $50 million a year and 300 employees. One of my favorite things I read about Remo is that when people would ask him who his market was, what's your target market, he would say everyone. He really believed that drumming was meant to be shared by everyone, which I think is pretty cool. In 1986, he was inducted into the Percussive Art Society Hall of Fame, and then additionally in 2015 he was inducted into the Bank of America Hall of Fame. Sorry, not Bank of America. Bands of America. I just wrote BOA. That's way different. Bands of America Hall of Fame for his contributions to music education. We'll edit that out in post.
Oh, that's Stan. That's...
Casey, you better put that Bank of America logo up on the screen. So that is, Remo Belli. He was one of definitely the most influential people in the field of percussion and banking in the 20th century.
I think one of my favorite comments on Facebook when he passed away was, I don't care if you're an Evans artist or what, you gotta acknowledge just what Remo has done. And
yeah, I mean, like basically him and Vic Firth. I mean,
right.
Like I can't think of anyone else as notable in the music industry.
Really incredible people. Yeah. So I played in Nuxuit in Mishawaka, Indiana.
Wow.
Isn't that random? Does anyone know where that is?
No.
It's near. I read it's near.
It's near South Bend.
I read about it.
It's near, because we did it. Third Coast did it in conjunction with University of Notre Dame, and so they visited several parks in the area, and Mishawaka was where we ended up doing it.
Yeah.
Very, very, very small town though.
Did you use Mylar heads?
Did not. sure there were some Remo heads in there.
I don't think I knew why they were called Weather Kings until, I was 20 something. It's like,
Yeah, so
oh,
they're
'cause
resistant to the weather.
I didn't touch a calf head until I mean grad school or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and the crazy thing to me though is if you think about drumming as an art form, drumming has existed for how many millenniums? I mean, since we figured out how to stretch an animal's dead skin over something and beat on it, we've had drumming. Um, but really, in the second half of the 20th century, this it's completely revolutionized to these the lugs that we all use with these synthetic heads.
I heard something just earlier today that archaeologists and historians say music is I forgot the exact wordage, but it is a like social universal, as in like or cultural universal, like every culture on the planet had music, even in some shape or form, and
Yeah.
we had it even before we had language, and yeah, it's yeah, of course. Terry, I see that on your website you're sponsored by Remo, and we use a lot of the same things. I'd love all these heads you have listed. For drum set especially, yeah, Power Stroke 3, that's what I have, use all the time. Actually not on this kit, but on a different one. And also the skin tones. I have a skin tone on my concert snare right now, and yeah, just love
Yeah,
it.
I was about to say the skin tones, like I think there's obviously still, I mean, skin heads are beautiful, don't get me wrong. But for many percussionists today, skin heads aren't very practical, I think it's safe to say. Um, and the skin tone heads, like, they sound pretty good, and I would say if you can keep a skin tone head on your drum, it's probably going to sound better than a skin head if you're traveling.
Oh yeah.
Possibly. Yeah, depending on where you're going.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love those. They just feel great too. I think
Yeah,
that
yeah, they
there's
don't
a
feel
huge
plastic.
difference in feel. Yeah.
How much calf does everybody use, if any?
I think I have. Personally, I think I just have one drum with a calf head on it. It's an old WFL, like 10 by 14 snare drum,
Mm.
field style, wooden hoop, and
Hmm.
and I put a calf head on that when I bought it just because it was so vintage. I wanted to try it and
Yeah.
left it on there. But
Yeah. Any calf at the university?
we have one like 30-inch bass drum that has a calf head on it.
Yeah. Yeah. All our bass drums have calf, which is
The one like notable calf head player I can think of is Dave Herbert, who there's actually like a video of him, like he shows up to all the Chicago Symphony concerts way early to like maintain his heads and all that sort of thing. So yeah, Dave Herbert is like the real deal with calf drum heads.
he looks really cool too, carrying around his like kiddie pool, like his
I'm so
the pink children's kiddie pool rolling up to the gig.
I have two things to add, little personal notes. One, it has nothing to do with why I play Remo, but I learned way after the fact that my uncle actually manufactures the film for Remo drum heads.
Wow.
What?
Which, yeah, I think it's pretty cool. But then my other story, speaking of calf drum heads, I might get in trouble for telling this story, but when I was a student at the University of Illinois, we had a studio class on how to change a calf cuica head. A 1 hour long studio class with William Murch on how to change a calf cuica head. And we had like probably at least 8 people around this little 8-inch cuica like trying to pull on the calf head. And at the end of an hour, we still didn't have the head.
Oh man.
So after that experience, I am all about synthetic drum heads. Totally cool with me.
And was
Yeah.
the stick already in the head when you were doing that? It must have.
He took like a broken snare drum head and he soaked it and brought it in like a newspaper bag, and then I think he put the stick in and tied the string, and then it was like this wet skin thing we were all trying to pull out. Yeah, it was a mess, and it made me very, very thankful that Remo has these pre-mounted synthetic heads you just slap on and screw on.
Yeah, you know what I really like for bass drums? You were talking about bass drums. I think it's called New Skin, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
They came out with that a few years ago. We have that on a 40-inch concert bass drum. I think that head sounds beautiful.
We've been lucky here at JMU. I guess I'm coming around to when we first moved here. So I guess once we hit July, I'll have seen the weather for a year.
Yeah.
And so far, the bass drum heads, it's okay. You can do, and I guess the scary thing would have been the winter, and nothing gnarly happened in the winter. One got kind of tight, but nothing that you didn't even need water. So I guess it's just kind of the luck of living in a kind of a rainy town.
Mm-hmm.
So, Terry, I had a question. Like I said, part of the reason I wanted to talk about this was to talk about music business. So, could you tell us about and there was actually a Facebook question of something about how did your business training roll into music, and can you tell us about the music business courses you teach?
Yeah, sure. Well, my history is that I have actually it's a pretty funny history. I think one of the questions is from one of my students, Garrett Brown, and he asked about how I got into percussion or what my path was or something like that. I went to Fresno State University right out of high school. I'm from Fresno, California, and I started as a music major, but as a really unformed and immature 18-year-old musician who played percussion and saxophone at that point. To me, getting a music degree meant either I was going to be a band director or I was going to be a jazz musician, because that's what I thought you would get a music degree to go do.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided I didn't want to do either one of those things right then. So I ended up being undeclared for a while, and I was playing music the whole time, playing in bands and stuff, but I ended up getting a degree in business and computer applications. And the ironic thing was the whole time I was there at Fresno State University, Steve Schick was the percussion professor there.
Wow.
But I didn't study with him. I took one class from him, which was a history of jazz and rock and roll class. And it blew my mind, because if you've ever been around Steve Schick, I mean, he could talk about the light bulb and your jaw would be on the ground, you know.
Yeah.
So it was a wonderful class. He was a fantastic teacher. I remember he played Ziklus for this class, jazz rock class. And he came
my goodness.
one day and Ziklus is set up, you know, and he talked about Stockhausen and played it. And I was just like, wow, this guy's incredible.
Mm-hmm.
So I got to know him from that class, and I also worked in a drum shop in Fresno as the manager of the drum department. So he would come in every now and then. If you know him at all, you know he's not very gear oriented. So, you know, maybe once a year he would come buy a pair of sticks or something. I don't know. But so I knew him a little bit, and when I finished school, I actually worked for Wells Fargo Bank, not Bank of America, sorry, Wells Fargo Bank.
Oh, it was the Wells Fargo Bank Hall of Fame. You got that wrong too.
See, now let me explain to you guys something about editing. Now I have to leave that in. That's how it works. Like now that stays.
Honestly, it's probably not the dumbest thing I've said on here, so I'm fine with it.
Yeah, so, you know, long story short, I was a business loan officer for Wells Fargo Bank, still playing gigs, and knew I was just going to be miserable unless I was doing music full time. And it had never occurred to me that there were other paths in music when I was younger, but I started to see these other options of what kind of music was out there, what I was interested in, what I could study, option of teaching at the college level, things like that. So I decided just to scrap it all and go back to school and study percussion, and then ended up to go and work with Steve at the graduate level. But the business degree has never been a bad thing for me. I learned a lot from doing that, and some really valuable life skills, some really valuable career management skills. And so my job at Southern Oregon University originally included overseeing a music business program that we had. We don't have that anymore. We're in the process of, we're kind of redesigning or have redesigned a few of our degree programs, including dropping the music business major, but starting a new Bachelor of Music program in both performance and music education. And then we have a new program that's an MBA in the arts, which is structured for anyone to be able to get a degree in music, art, or theater, undergraduate degree, and then a fifth-year MBA degree, so having a master's in business administration. Yeah, so that's pretty cool. And I do teach a course in music business, and we cover in that course all kinds of things from the publishing industry, the recording industry, obviously how that's all blown up and changed in recent years, career management, radio, all kinds of stuff. It's a kind of a survey of career possibilities in the music industry, and it's a really interesting course, a lot of fun.
So what is the breakdown of your students? Are several of them performance ed? Are any of them pursuing the MBA in addition, or has that started yet? What does your studio look like?
Next year, so that's brand new. Yeah, so my breakdown is a mixture of Bachelor of Arts students, performance students, and instruction students, and then we have a Master of Music program that I have 4 spots in. So
wow. So
I have 4 graduate students as well.
Excellent.
I have to say, one thing that's refreshing for me to hear always is everyone, I feel like when people are 18 and graduating from high school, everyone wants an answer out of them as to what they're doing for the rest of their life. And like, what's your short path to get there? Like, I'm going to get a degree in this, and I'm going to go work in this field. And it's refreshing to hear people that, like you or Jason Haheim, that said, music was always kind of in my mind, and I wasn't quite sure of how to make a career in it, and I got this other thing, and it worked for a while. Then I decided I wanted to do this other thing. So instead of forcing myself to be safe and work at a bank, I went back to school and went to music. Like, I think that's really cool and admirable. And it brings me back to like what Keith Aleo said a long time ago about how some people's musical path is achieved when they're 22 years old and they win, Chicago Symphony right out of their undergrad or something like that, and then they have to figure out what to do for the rest of their life to maintain their hunger. And other people kind of, have a more odd path and end up reaching something great in a different way.
Yeah. We have many paths, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank God.
That's true. Yeah.
And your master's students, is that what Left Edge Ensemble is?
Yeah, Left Edge is the graduate percussion group, as well as some of the advanced undergrads get to play in that group as well.
Great.
And I play with them too from time to time.
That's cool. How do you, as a young collegiate educator, I wonder about that and have experimented with playing with them. And actually, Casey, yes, we were talking about this one time on podcast. I remember your view on this too. So, Terry, have you been doing that for a long time, or what do you see the benefit of that? And
yeah, I've always done that. Even before I had a graduate program, our graduate program is only 3 years old here now, so it's it's very young, and I've always played with my students. I've never felt like I needed to like draw a line and separate myself from that.
Yeah.
I know some teachers do that, and I think for them that's probably fine, and that's a good decision for some people. But I've never felt like I needed to separate myself from them. I've always felt like there's at least some things we could collaborate on and play together, and I learn from them, they learn from me. It's a fun process.
Well, also I think it's a really good way of teaching them what chamber skills are.
Yes.
Because you can, you can either, there's some pieces like, say, a Christopher Rouse piece like Kuka Ilumoko or something like that. You can conduct, or you can try to force them to do chamber skills, or you can join the ensemble and sort of lead within the ensemble. And I think people can grow from that experience.
Definitely.
And not that the PASIC International Percussion Ensemble Competition is the end-all be-all, but you can't play with your students and put something that or a guest artist on that tape. I find that kind of frustrating.
I
totally understand why they do it, but I hate thinking like program for that. I would rather, I don't know.
Yeah, but like if at the same rate, if I'm going to PASIC to see a student ensemble, like I want to see, I don't want to see X marimba soloist.
No, I mean the application tape, Ben.
Yeah. But still, I think that's a way that people would try and like kind of like, I don't want to say cheat on the application, but get a foot ahead is by having like some great virtuosic soloists.
But it's all about editing, Ben. So like your student goes like that, and then you cut to a view of like someone else's hands going like that.
I thought you were gonna make some sort of like, and then you cut to the view of the Bank of America iPhone app.
I could load up some kind of screen share joke. Hey, well, we do have some other Facebook questions. I'd like to go to one from Ted Jackson. Ted Jackson, man, thanks for the questions always. When Mark Applebaum was on the show, he stated that he had learned a lot about writing for percussion from Terry Longshore. Could you explain your process of working with Mark Applebaum?
Sure, yeah. Basically, Mark owes his whole career to me. He would not hesitate to say that. So, that was very generous of Mark to say something of that. I think we were students together at the University of California, San Diego for a few years, and worked together quite a bit there. I premiered a lot of his pieces that he was writing as a doctoral student there, and then that just continued after he left, and we both started our careers in different places. We've collaborated over the years many times, and I think Mark is the kind of person who really wants to understand things at a very deep level. And as you know from his podcast or meeting him or working with him, he's extremely intelligent and very passionate about everything he does. So when he's writing a piece of music, whether it's for marimba solo like the piece he wrote for Steve, or a huge ensemble, he really wants to understand what all the capabilities are. So yeah, I think he was always comfortable asking me for input on things, whether it was a piece he was writing for me or a piece he was writing for someone else, and we've always been kind of there for each other with any projects we're working on. We like to bounce ideas off each other a lot, and I've certainly helped him maybe get an understanding of what instruments are capable of and what different kinds of mallets can do and things like that. He always has lots of questions about that, but he'll find that information wherever he needs to get it. So I can't really take too much credit for that. But.
So Terry, one of Mark's most recent pieces that I was on the consortium for, and you were the consortium organizer, was Composition Machine Number 1, which unfortunately I have not gotten around to playing yet, but I would imagine you have. I think you premiered it. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Could you tell us about, well, for anyone that isn't aware of what that piece is, could you tell us about the piece and then your experience with it?
Sure. So Composition Machine Number 1 was a piece that Mark and I started brainstorming actually a few years ago when we were at Steve Schick's concerts in New York City for his 60th birthday. We both attended that together, and we just started talking about a new solo piece, and actually Mark started making notes on the program right there at the concert. Wow. And it kind of was born out of that. And the idea behind the piece, which is a very interesting thing, is it's kind of a loop. So what happens is the performer comes out and puts a graphic score up for the audience to see, which has been previously created, and interprets that score with a group of instruments, and then destroys that score by crumpling it up, walks to the middle of the stage and drops the score on an amplified table, and then proceeds to pick up all of these prescribed everyday objects like wrenches and tin cans and cups and things, CD case, etc. And the only written music of the piece is a 2-minute piece of music for placing and moving those objects around on the table. And Mark tells you exactly and explicitly the rhythms in the order of items to put on the table, but he doesn't tell you where to put them or with which hand to pick them up or any of that.
And he does notates like across, like it's not all just the impact.
Putting it down or moving it somewhere on the table or rubbing it on the table or playing like a tremolo with your fingers on it. He tells you those kinds of things, but never where to put them or with which hand or any of that. And so then at the end of that 2 minutes, you have all of these objects on the table, which also has a big sheet of white paper on it. And then you trace all of those objects with a black marker, and that becomes a new version of your graphic score, which you then take over to the other side of the stage, put up on stands for the audience to see and interpret with a different instrument or set of instruments. And then therein concludes the piece. You roll up the new score at the end of the piece, you walk across stage and put that score at your original location where you started the piece, thereby completing the loop. and that becomes where you start the next time you perform the score by unrolling that one you just created. So the whole piece is a kind of closed loop.
Great.
So for me, I messed around with learning this a little bit and just didn't really have the time. I guess now I actually do have the time, so maybe I should pull it out. But for me, learning it's interesting because, like you said, he notates like sort of the impact and the sound, but he doesn't say move the deck of cards up or anything like that. So did you kind of make up your own plan and do it the same every time? Is that how you went about it?
Yeah, what I did was there are a couple of gestures in that piece that are fairly rapid, and for me meant that I needed to have things in the same location every time to feel like I could articulate those gestures correctly. You know, if they were in a different location every time, it would be too confusing, I think, to do that. For me, at least. I'm sure somebody can do it, but I couldn't do it. So the first probably 2/3 or 3/4 of the piece, I do pretty much the same every time, as far as where I place things, where they end up. And then after, there's this like accelerating like 21 note gesture, I think. But after that happens, then at that point I start being more free with where I move things or place things for the last third or fourth of the piece. And then that enables me to be a little bit more improvisational with the way the score ends up looking. And so then, like, you know, score A to score B, there's a tiny bit of difference too, which I like. I think it's nice that they have just a slightly different look each time. So there, some of it, you know, there's letters and numbers that you write down that pertain to the day of the week and the date and the number of bottle caps that land on each side and stuff like that. So, but as far as the shapes go, I like to see it maybe just a little bit different every time. And so that enables me to do that, but also feel like I'm confident playing the piece.
And then the score indicates that for the first and third portions of the piece where you're actually reading this graphic score, basically you're allowed to use your own choice of instruments. You can interpret the score how you want. What were the kind of parameters you came up with for those?
Yeah, so all he does is basically tell you, you know, you'll have two setups and one of them should be more elaborate than the other. Is that short version of what he asks you to do. So for my first set of instruments that I use in the initial round of performances I gave, I had kind of a little multi-setup of instruments that I really liked to play. And they were several drum skin instruments, I think 2 wooden instruments, and like a splash cymbal that I tied some rope to that I could pick up and play the drums with or play on with a stick. So I had a little, kind of just a little multi-setup of instruments that I really like. And then my second setup was just simply a Roland Hand Sonic, which is a electronic hand percussion controller. But it has over 1,000 sounds in it and really some amazing sounds and some gestural capabilities in how you play it. So I found that what I liked about that was it was very simple compared to the other thing, one drum versus a whole setup of drums. But it has so many sounds that it's an almost endless palette of interpretive ideas that you can use with. But I kind of limited myself to a collection of those for that realization of the piece. What's great is that every version I've seen, I've coached a few people on this piece now, and last summer I was in Australia and worked with a student there at ANAM in Melbourne on the piece, and then I've had a couple of my students play it here, and then I've seen a few videos of some of the consortium members that have played it, and you know, everybody's version is so radically different.
Mm-hmm.
It's just really cool that it just becomes a really individual thing for every performer that does it.
So Megan just played Go Dog Go, right?
Gone Dog Gone, yeah.
Gone Dog Gone.
Yeah.
And Ben plays aphasia pretty regularly. What do you guys think is the first Applebaum piece a young person should do? You know, not too young, but you know, maybe, I don't know, upper level undergraduate or a master student or something. The first one they should go to.
I'll let someone else answer first.
Yeah, I don't know. That's a hard question, you know. I feel like each piece is so individual, you know, and it's such a high learning curve for a first piece of his music.
Are any of them
No matter
easy?
what.
This is another way to ask it. Are any of them easier than the others?
I think, I mean, my experience with aphasia was a lot easier than I was expecting.
I think it's
And
very hard. I think it's tough.
it's also a piece though that I probably mentioned this before. Like, I didn't learn it like I learned most pieces. Like, I never intended to perform it on a recital or anything like that. I just kind of learned it for fun. So I think like not having a deadline for it kind of meant that I could just sort of explore it in a fun way for myself.
Hmm.
So I don't know. I think that aphasia for me wasn't. I mean, that's the only one of his pieces I've performed, but it wasn't too bad.
Hmm.
I think something that was so striking to me was the length of descriptions for each gesture.
Yeah, yeah.
I just, I wasn't expecting that, and it took hours to go through, and
No,
what probably could have been said in, half a sentence was explained in 6 sentences, but it made it so vivid and detailed, and
yeah, I
um,
thought for me like
it was a
the
great experience.
descriptions he gives are instead of calling them descriptions, I would maybe call them clarifications.
Yeah.
Like when he says key turn, like I think like doing this, but when you read it, it's like okay, it should be held about stomach height or something like that, and it's a very rapid turn, like. But then when I saw key turn, I wasn't like okay, hold it this height, turn it this, like it just happened, so.
Do you remember
Yeah, the
in
details.
do you remember in third grade when your English teacher told you, okay, what we're going to do today is write how to make a peanut butter jelly sandwich, and of course it's an exercise in descriptive writing. So you write, okay, put the peanut butter on the bread, and she takes the loaf of bread still in the bag, and like takes the jam and like puts the jar on the loaf, and you're like, no, what are you doing? That's not what. She's like, well, that's what you said to do, and you're like, oh, you.
I don't remember that exercise, but that's
You're a
really
neat
cool.
teacher, man.
Oh yeah, I learned. Yeah, it's like, oh man, you got to be really detailed in your gesture descriptions. I
I
wonder if you
could
can
see
get his
someone
gesture
like just being
descriptions on
like I could
tape.
see Casey being principled enough to be like, no, that's what I do, and like to this day, just whenever he wants a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, it's just a loaf of bread with peanut butter on top.
Hey, let's go to a Facebook question. How about another Facebook question? Um, I like this one, another one from Jared Brown. He says, with the internet and readily available software, anyone can doodle and compose these days. Has this yielded many? This has yielded many wonderful and interesting ideas in music that otherwise may not have been exposed. However, do you or can you think of a way in which this? Oh shoot, I didn't finish copying it. Can you think of a way in which this might be negative in any way? I think is how the question finishes.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think my personal opinion is that I think that we can learn a lot about playing music by composing music.
Mm.
Whether those compositions end up being something that are publicly performed ever or not, I think it's a very instructive process to try your hand at composing. I think it's a really good way to learn about structure and recognize certain kinds of structure, and then open another window into your mind about how to think about maybe interpreting those structures or bringing them to the forefront in your own performance. Um, I do think it's a really valuable experience. That being said, it certainly is. I think what Jared's getting at is that maybe it's a little easier these days. The tools out there make it easier. The digital tools, certainly for both the process of composition and for the dissemination of your works. Um, and like that, what's that saying? Everybody has a good book in them, but maybe that's where it should stay. Did he write that in there too?
I think that was the tail end of the question that I
Right. Okay. Yeah.
copy. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and I think there's some truth to that for probably for all of us, right? But I do think it's a good process to go through to work on composition. I try to give students tasks at doing that. Sometimes I've had them write their own exercises for working on certain techniques they're trying to do. I try to encourage them always when they're learning a new piece and it's got this thing that's really hard. I try to have them create an etude out of that hard passage, so that they're taking themselves out of either reading the music or thinking about, okay, I got to learn this whole piece. Okay, just stop, and that thing that you're being asked to do that has this complex rotation or whatever it might be, it's really this kind of idea, and that's the thing you need to get better at in order to pull that off within the context of the piece. So why not make up just a little exercise that mirrors what you're doing in that piece? So that's a very short form of that compositional idea, but I do feel strongly about composition as something we should all do, whether it's something put out there for others to perform or not.
I saw your piece crash on YouTube, and that's real cool.
Thanks. Yeah, and that's a good point, Ben, about that. I think is related to Jared's question, is that when you write a piece and then it gets out there, played by others, sometimes those interpretations aren't what you intended. Sometimes that's an awesome thing, and sometimes it's maybe not an awesome thing, right? This is what composers have been living with their whole lives, or dealing with others' interpretations of their works. And sometimes you have no control over that because you have never met that person and you haven't worked with them. And I think now in our modern era, it's so easy to get a hold of music. We can just download it or get it emailed to us. And sometimes, that shortens the process of maybe a really thoughtful process of investing oneself in something, maybe. But it also makes so many more things available to us.
I partly wondered if something he's getting at. I was actually watching last night. There's a great little BBC series on Salvador Dali, Picasso, I think Andy Warhol, and Matisse. I happened to be watching the Picasso one last night, and he shows you what Picasso could do when he was 12. I mean, he could do like excellent romantic, accurate, wonderful painting, and then chose to go to this cubism and this abstraction. And Salvador Dali, the same thing. It's like he could paint these really realistic, very accurate paintings, and then made a conscious decision to go to surrealism and do all this experimental stuff.
And music, Schoenberg.
Yeah, well, exactly. So there you go. I mean, there's another, and I think we see a lot of our modern composers do the same thing. And the thing that stuck in my head immediately when I saw Jared's question was, do you feel like young people are like fast tracking to this abstraction, and they see the idea for like they see aphasia and they're like, oh, that's a neat idea, and like they can kind of do something really similar just on their own very quickly without gaining any of that, any of that kind of, I don't know, the proof that that you can really do the traditional things. I hate to say proof because that's.
Well, we had talked about that with playing too. Learning certain pieces and going through some standard repertoire before digesting something that maybe you play, but.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I think it's really easy to see in playing, because I can't tell you how many times I've seen maybe one of my own pieces or like a sophomore playing rebonds, and they're like, well, I didn't know what other multi-soloists to play. I think this is kind of like the only one, right? And you're like, yeah, I mean, so you can see it in the playing, but in composition, it's tougher. I mean, I think it's unfortunate, but a lot of people, they may not be able to tell Schoenberg from a decent 12-tone student project or something. Hey, Laurel.
Hi.
Laurel made it. Terry, this is Laurel.
Hi.
Hi, nice to meet you.
I have a question for everyone.
No, I'm not done with my rant yet.
What's your favorite flavor of Jelly Belly?
Green.
What's your favorite flavor? Blue.
I think
All right, I need an answer from everyone.
I like the one with the spots in it right there. Like pink
Tutti
with
Frutti?
spots. Yeah, that looks good.
It's probably Tutti Frutti, yeah. Or strawberry cheesecake.
I was going to say strawberry cheesecake would be mine.
Okay. Casey?
I said, man, I was the first one to answer. I said green.
You can't say green. There's green apple, kiwi, lemon lime, margarita, sun-kissed lime, and watermelon.
You have
Watermelon.
the vomit flavor?
No, this is not the Harry Potter jelly beans. I think mine is buttered popcorn.
I think that's mine also.
Ugh, weird. That's weird.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's not weird.
Yeah. We will go
Anyway.
to the Harry Potter land in Florida with our nephew. What is that called?
Harry Potter World.
Okay.
My brother's trying to read all the books to get up to speed for
Your brother is?
Yeah, to get up to speed for like the roller coaster, because he probably need to have read the Order of the Phoenix to understand the, you know. Yeah.
Okay, so I have a
you-
serious question if Casey's done with his rant.
Well, can we go back to that one for a second?
Yeah, Megan, come on. Yeah, good question.
Can we
Yeah,
go back
please,
to that for a second?
Yeah.
You guys hear me okay? I can't tell.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do it.
It was kind of going glitchy there for a second.
Oh, okay.
Let's see. So we were talking about, skipping over stuff or something, right?
Yes.
One thing I think that I agree with you, Casey, that it can be harder in composition, but I think also just to go back to Mark as an example, in a piece like Aphasia, even though in many ways it's a very non-traditional kind of composition, right? It's a tape piece and gestures, but when you look at what he's done with the recording, the sense of structure and development and like surprise and humor and themes and there's a real clear sense of someone that's a very skilled craftsman there, as a composer who's not just someone who thought that's cool, I could do that. I think that comes through in a really honest way when someone's put in that work, and even if it's a new kind of work that we haven't heard before, that background and that intellect really shows through.
Well, the thing I was going to say is I think you might be able to fool someone into thinking, oh, that sounds the same, but the utility, as far as what the piece achieves, they're not going to be able to pull it off. So I think aphasia has something real specific to say, and it's a real hard thing to get across conceptually. So the amateur who may say, oh, I can make neat computer sounds on my computer also, yeah, sure, they may be able to get some sounds that someone who isn't analyzing and really looking thoroughly for a message, they may be able to fool them into thinking, oh yeah, that sounds similar, but yeah, just like Picasso and Dali, it's like they're saying really amazing things with their works. They're going abstract for a reason. It's about language and utility, not just about aesthetic. So I don't know. It's yet another example of like the distinction of aesthetic and utility, and how you need one to get across the other, and how they're really different things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That makes me think of, I don't know the context of this conversation and the rest of the episode, but like I love Webern's music, and Schoenberg says, imagine the lack of ego it takes to do what he does in terms of being so brief, because Webern's thing is like his entire catalog can be performed in 4 hours, his entire output, because it's all so incredibly refined, just talking about someone with the skill and the training and the insight to know what to do, and Schoenberg says something like, imagine the genius it takes to express like an entire emotion in one gesture, an entire novel in a single breath. He just raves about it, and I think of Webern when you guys were talking about that.
Yeah, sure. No, I think that's a good example, and I think Mark Applebaum is a great example too. I mean, he's got this amazing jazz chops, and just like Salvador Dali can, oh, you want me to show you I can paint? Here you go. Let me paint you a very accurate, perfect landscape or something. Mark Applebaum can do the same thing. So yeah, I think we're all in agreement. Yeah, good question by Jared. What was that?
I said definitely.
Oh, okay. Well,
Megan, did you have a thing?
Yeah, well, I just wanted to ask Terry about if he could tell us a little bit more about his studying classical Indian music and Spanish flamenco music, how that came about, and how you use that in your performance and composition today?
Yeah, the Indian thing came first. When I was an undergraduate student in Sacramento, California, Dan Kennedy was hired while I was there to be the new professor of percussion, and he gave a recital as I think it was part of his interview probably, and he played tabla in the interview on that recital, and I just fell in love with the sound of that instantly, and so I told him after he was hired I wanted to learn, so he said, get some drums and I'll teach you. So I bought some drums and started studying with him, and then he sent me to his teacher, Swapan Chowdhury, who teaches at the Ali Akbar College of Music in Marin County, California. And so I started working with him and studied there for a couple of years, and then when I decided to go down to San Diego for my graduate work, it was just a lucky thing that Swapan Chowdhury also teaches at Cal Arts. And so he and John Bergamo they invited me to just come up whenever Swapan was there, and I could sit in on classes and continue my tabla study. So that was wonderful. And then at UC San Diego, when I was there, they hired a wonderful sitar virtuoso, Karthik Seshadri, to teach sitar at the university. And so I got to accompany him for 3 hours a week, which was immensely valuable to just accompany. Which is, tabla is an accompanimental instrument, so just to do that every week for a long time was super, super wonderful. And then the Spanish flamenco thing came, respectively, not that long ago. It was in 2007, I guess, and I was, I'd been playing lots of hand drums over the years, and I had a group of students when they graduated who chipped in and bought me a cajon as a gift, which was just the sweetest thing. And so I had this cajon. I was, playing it as most people do, just using it for all kinds of stuff. And I decided I should learn something about flamenco. And there's a great flamenco guitarist who lives here in Ashland, and he was teaching some kind of somewhat informal flamenco classes there, where he was teaching people to sing and clap rhythms and guitar if they wanted to learn guitar. And so I just went and started hanging out at his classes, and we just hit it off instantly and started playing together as a duo, and we still play together. I was getting ready to take a sabbatical that year and hadn't 100% decided what I wanted to do, and I realized then I should just go to Spain and keep following this flamenco thing. So not long after that, I was doing a day of percussion in Omaha, Nebraska, and Steve Smith was one of the other artists there, and we did some playing together on the concert because Steve's also into Indian music, and so we said, well, let's work some stuff up that we can play together on this concert. So that was very fun. We did that, and when we were flying back, because he lives in Ashland part-time, we were hanging out in the airport on the way back, and I was telling him, oh yeah, I'm going to go to Spain next year and study flamenco. I don't know who yet. I got to research all that. He's like, oh, I have this great friend. He just played on my last album. He lives in Madrid. And that introduction was made, and the whole thing just went from there.
Wow.
And met some great flamenco percussionists in Madrid. Spent a month there, and we did some, trading. They wanted to learn about Indian percussion. I wanted to learn about Spanish, so we just hung out and played drums and
so
doing it.
Awesome.
So you're sitting in the airport with Steve Smith, and "Don't Stop Believin'" comes on. Is it really awkward?
I don't know.
I imagine it's like everyone kind of just goes like, oh.
I'd be into it. I'd be like, hell yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's me. Yeah.
Mhm.
No, of course.
I asked him, like, what's one of your favorite drum parts, from the Journey days, and that was one of the songs he mentioned.
Oh yeah.
Really?
Aw.
The different parts and this tom ride thing that he did, and cool.
That's cool. Yeah. Yeah. He's an unbelievable drummer.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Well, man, Terry Longshore, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, it's been fun, guys.
Yeah.
Thank you
Thanks
so
for
much.
coming.
Thanks for your segment, Ben, and thanks so much, everyone on Facebook, for the questions. Really good ones from Ted Jackson and Jared Brown. Thanks you guys very much. And man, we'll catch you guys next week for episode 45. So anyone, have a great week and enjoy Game of Thrones tonight.
Yeah.
Cool. Yep. See you guys later. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.